Hello, everybody, and welcome to Box Seat Banter. I'm your host, Billy Ballas, a longtime baseball coach, a season ticket holder, huge fan of baseball, and just always invested in baseball one way or another. Today, I am broadcasting from the Crawford boxes here in Minute Maid Park, and joining me is a longtime Astros fan, Tony Adams, and you may know him. He created signstealingscandal.com to kind of look into that Houston, the trash can banging. It's an interesting website to look at that and the analysis he's done. He's kind of made the podcast rounds. He was on with Ben Ryder. He was on Exceptionally Wild. And we're happy to have him join us here today on Box Seat Banter. Tony, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks for having me, Billy. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and so again, we're talking about the Astros. They began back in 1962 as the National League expansion team. They joined the league with the Mets, but they were not originally the Astros. They were the Houston Colt 45s. And then they changed their name to the Astros in 1965 to kind of honor NASA's connections to Houston and their move into the Astrodome. Tony, were you around back in 19? When did your fandom begin with the Astros?
I started becoming a fan in the late 70s, so 76, 77. So definitely in the dome period. I got to go there quite a bit, but the opening of it was before my time.
Is the Astros a much more fitting nickname than the Colt 45s?
Yeah, obviously, at that time, space was everything, and it's hard to understand now how big it was that the NASA was here, and I think they also had some issues with the Colt 45 company, and some licensing issues that they were going to have to start paying some licensing for that. So I think they went with a open source or some free naming rights there.
And of course, during like the space race there in the 60s, I'm sure, that was something to witness, incredible. And so, the Astros there in Houston makes total sense. And as we mentioned, they played there in the Astrodome, the first domed stadium. It had some growing pains there early on. But they played there from 65 to 1999. It was, deemed the eighth wonder of the world. Then they moved into Minute Maid Park, which was originally Enron Field. But we know how Enron worked out. And so they've been playing in Minute Maid Park since 2000. Tony, I understand you've attended games at both stadiums. What are your thoughts on each of those?
The Astrodome was an experience. It was just an audio-visual experience with a scoreboard going off whenever there was a big event. A home run, you had to see the Cowboys shooting, and the bull with the horns, and just the scale of it being inside in such a huge building was just something that it was the only place you could do it. So that was very much for particularly when I was younger. It was such a kind of a wonder to go there, and it was such a treat, and so that was a great and just a unique experience that you really weren't having anywhere else in the world at the time. But it was definitely showing its age by the end there, and it was definitely time for another ballpark. And also, the Astrodome was built for football and baseball, so it was wasn't great for baseball. You were really kind of far away from the action sometimes. But so when they built Minute Maid, one of the things they wanted to do was get people closer to the action, to make it more like the old ballparks where a lot of overhang, and you're right there. And it really is a very nice park to watch a baseball game in. It's just very no bad lines, no bad seats. It's just very intimate. You can walk around. Lots of points where you can stop and take a look at the game from back from the outfield or any particular point. So it's a great park, and it's really served the city and the team very well.
Yeah, although they play on natural grass there at Minute Maid Park, don't they?
They do, yes.
Is that kind of Is that blasphemous for the Astros to not play on AstroTurf?
No, I think that I don't miss AstroTurf. I think the players don't miss it either.
Yeah, I don't think their knees do. That's for sure.
Yeah, the way the Astrodome too, it was so big, and with that AstroTurf, and it was the long fields. If you got a ball on that AstroTurf heading for the gaps, it was triple city. It was just so many triples, and you couldn't hit too many out of the park until they moved the fences in. But boy, you could get a lot of extra bases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, and I don't think people realize, because now the scoreboards is, commonplace. They got huge HD color scoreboards and all kinds of stuff. But at the Astrodome back then, with that exploding scoreboard, that was novel at the time.
Yeah, and particularly inside with the noise and the lights, and it was just the scale of it was just hard to understand at this point, because it would start on one side and it would go to the next, and it was sensory overload almost. It was just, particularly if you're a kid hopped up on popcorn and cotton candy, and seeing all the lights and then the noise, it was just like, oh my gosh, it was really amazing.
Yeah, not like going to a game at Wrigley Field, that's for sure.
No.
So now looking back at the Astros, so they played in the National League, and then they were in the NL West from 69 to 93. Then when divisional play began in 94, they played in the NL Central from 94 to 2012. And then they switched leagues to the AL, and they've been in the AL West since 2013. So a rare team that's been in 3 different divisions. I think, they and the Brewers have both switched leagues over time. What was it like as a fan adjusting from the switch to the National League to the American League?
Well, obviously there's a big difference is the designated hitter, and coming from the National League, I was really opposed to the designated hitter. I wasn't thinking it was baseball, but as time has gone on, I've actually come to appreciate the designated hitter, particularly as pitchers have become less and less competent at hitting. It seems that it's basically it's an out, and now we don't even do sacrifices that much anymore. It's just it's a little disappointing that we had to go to the American League. We were kind of forced to, but and also it's West Coast, and Houston's in the Central, so the time difference makes it difficult on fans.
That's a good point.
Games can start at 9:00, which is pretty tough, particularly for younger kids. But in general, it's been okay, and like I said, I've become to appreciate the designated hitter, and looking forward to getting rid of it in the National League. So we don't see our hitters, our pitchers batting, and when we're playing NL teams in their fields.
Yeah, so now they've had quite a bit of success here in the past quarter century. They had a run there in the 90s where they won the NL Central in 97, 98, 99, and 01. And then they also won the NL Wild Card in 04 and 05. So quite a few playoff appearances there in that short stretch.
Right. That's the Biggio Bagwell era and the Berkman era, the Killer Bees.
The Killer Bees.
Yeah.
And then they won the NL pennant there in 05, that kind of final year of their playoff stretches there. When they moved over to the American League, it took them a few years to get going, but once they did, they've been successful. They won the West in 2017, 18, and 19, 3 years in a row. They won the wild card in 2015, and then again this year in 2020. And they have, along with that NL pennant in 05, they've got 2 AL pennants in 2017 and 2019. And they won that 2017 World Series. So then we kind of get to the elephant in the room when we bring up 2017.
The asterisks in the room.
Yeah. Which again, it prompted you to build that sign-stealing-scandal.com website. So I guess we can talk about it here. We've got to address it at some point. It's not going to be the focus of this episode. We're going to talk about the shining history of the Astros, like you mentioned, the Killer Bees and some of the other great players in the past quarter century. But we do have to bring up this 2017 World Series. So, as a Dodger fan, I was on the other end of it. What are your thoughts on that 2017 World Series? Because I know there's a lot of Astros fans out there that kind of just push it off to the side and say everyone does it or something, and they try to, say that it's kind of justified in some way or another. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the problems with anybody cheating is that it tilts the playing field to some degree. The question is, did it tilt the playing field enough to make a difference? And unfortunately, it's impossible to really know that. And it's not fair that they were cheating during that season. And it obviously, like I said, it did tilt the playing field to some degree. And so I can't feel the same about that the World Series win as I could if, we knew that it was, there was no cheating going on that year. For so many people in Houston, that World Series meant so much.
Yeah, understandably so, after everything that everybody went through.
It was, it was right after Harvey, and so many people were displaced. I had lost my house and all my car and basically everything I owned, and was displaced for over a year. The city was really reeling, and even just if it wasn't right after Harvey, we'd been winless for so many years. A lot of people had been fans for a long time, and actually, were never able to see that and to finally get over that hump. It was really exciting. So I understand Astros fans that say that regardless of what happened during that year, the feeling that they had at that moment is still special to them. For me, I looking back, it did mean a lot to me, but it's still something that doesn't quite have the same shine as it did back when it first happened.
Yeah, understandable. I think that's an appropriate reaction and feelings towards that. Because in the moment you're living it, it's very exciting. It was an incredible World Series, the 7 games. Several of them very exciting, very close. And so in that moment you're living very emotional. You're on those highs, and so those feelings occurred. There's no debating that. And but the aftermath kind of made a lot of sense. Kind of take some luster off of that.
Yeah, and like I said, would it have made a difference if they weren't cheating? It's impossible to say. I mean, it's easy to say. I understand how Dodger fans or any other team might say that. Yeah, of course, it made a difference, but the reality is, we don't know for sure how it would have turned out otherwise. And that's actually one of the biggest things that they stole from us is the true outcome of that competition.
Yeah. So now kind of jumping back into something a little more positive again for the Astros as we finish up this opening segment. They've retired a few numbers in their organization. Number 5 retired for Jeff Bagwell. Number 7 for Craig Biggio, a couple members of those Killer Bees, and we'll kind of touch on them a little more later in the program. Number 24 is retired for the Toy Cannon, Jimmy Wynn. Number 25 for Jose Cruz Sr. Number 32 is retired for James Umbricht, and that was a name I didn't really recognize. So I found it odd that his number was retired, but he actually, I think he had melanoma and he died at 33 during his playing career. So the Astros honored him. 33 retired for Mike Scott, the great pitcher for the Astros, and another great pitcher, Nolan Ryan, has his number 34 retired. And then number 40 is retired for another player who died prematurely, Don Wilson. Number 49 retired for Larry Dierker. And then, of course, 42 retired for Jackie Robinson. It's retired throughout baseball. Do you have any fun connections to any of these players here with their numbers retired?
Oh, when Nolan Ryan came along, that was something. He was the first $1 million contract, and that was 1980, and that was very exciting. And I was, I think, 13 or 14 when he first signed, and and he was coming back home. Basically, he was
right.
born just outside of Houston, so it was really exciting. And obviously Biggio and Bagwell are just the penultimate Astros. Both of them started basically about the same time and spending their entire careers here and being both Hall of Famers. It's pretty unusual for that to happen these days.
Yeah, very unusual. So yeah, that's a kind of look at the Astros organization, and then we'll get to more in just a moment. Tony, every week on the program, I have a trivia question, and so last week on the program I talked about the A's, but actually I forgot to answer one of the trivia questions about the Rangers. And this was kind of a bonus trivia question I had. Usually I like to keep the trivia questions, within the past quarter century. But one of the Rangers things I had, it just seemed too good not to include. And that question was, who was the first manager of the Texas Rangers? Because on that program, you may remember, we discussed how the Texas Rangers began play in DC and then moved to Texas. I forget exactly what year that was, in the 60s, I believe. But so when they moved to Texas, who was their first manager? Who was the manager at that time? I forgot to answer this question on the A's episode, so I'm answering it here. Before I give the answer, Tony, do you know who the first manager of the Texas Rangers was?
I believe it's Ted Williams.
Yeah, Ted Williams. And again,
it's very odd to see pictures of him in a Rangers uniform.
Yeah.
and the Washington Senators.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that was just, that name was too big to not include. I had a different trivia question with the Rangers as well for the past 25 years, but I wanted to mention that because that was such a interesting one.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people remember that or know that,
Yeah, and so Joey, who was my guest for the Rangers, he failed to remember that one. So that's a nice pull there. Now, the last week, talking about the Athletics, I had a couple. One of them was not the most positive one, which was who hit the ball where Jeter had his famous flip play. The ball was hit, down into the right field corner. A lot of people remember that Jeremy Giambi was the one thrown out at the plate.
Allegedly.
But then who, not everyone remembers who hit the ball. Tony, do you remember who hit that ball?
Honestly, I was looking at this play this week, but I didn't focus on who hit the ball.
It was, left-handed batter as he pulled it, down into the right field corner. And Matt, who was my guest on the A's podcast, he did remember this one. It was Terrence Long. Oh. Terrence Long hit that ball. Terrence Long, I think he was also the one who was thrown out at third with, Ichiro's laser throw there, early in his rookie year. So Terrence Long kind of involved in a couple of not so great moments there.
Yeah, I don't think his jersey sells pretty well for them.
And then the kind of more positive question for the A's, which was which players are their major award winners in the past 25 century? That's MVP, Cy Young, and Rookie of the Year. They had 4 Rookie of the Years, 1 Cy Young, and 2 MVP awards in this period. I know you're not an A's guy, Tony, but do you want to throw out a guess, or do you want to pass on that one?
Randy Johnson with the Cy Young?
No, we're talking A's.
Oh, I'm sorry, A's. Oh, geez. We're talking Seattle for some reason. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, they've got Matt had the he had the Cy Young and the 2 MVPs. Zito won the Cy Young in 2002, one of the members of their big 3 pitchers. And then Jason Giambi won the 2000 MVP, and Miguel Tejada won the 2002 MVP.
That's true.
And then their Rookie of the Years, I think, Matt had Bobby Crosby, who won the Rookie of the Year in 2004. I forget if he had any of the other Rookie of the Years, but Ben Grieve won the Rookie of the Year in 98. And then Houston Street in 2005, and then Andrew Bailey in 2009. So those are their major award winners in the past, going back to 95. So that brings us to today's trivia question about the Astros. So Tony, in the past 25 years, The Astros have had the number 1 overall pick 3 times, and they had it 3 years in a row, 2012, 2013, and 2014. Do you remember, can you name any of their 1-1 picks?
Correa.
Okay, Carlos Correa.
Bregman.
And
Adele.
Adele?
No. No, I was close though. I think I got the name wrong.
Oh yeah, I think I know who I know who you're trying to say. So I'll give you. I'll say that you've got 1.5 correct. Giving you a half point for the last one.
Okay.
I won't say who's right between the other two. I'll give that answer on the show next week.
All right.
But any listeners, if you want to throw a guess out there, you can do so on social media. It's at Box Eat Banter on both Twitter and Instagram. Now the Astros, they were owned by the judge, Roy Hoffines, which Ben Reiter had a nice little bio on the judge on his podcast about, I think, The Edge, the one that you were on an episode of that. Now he owned the team from 62 to 75. And GE and Ford owned the team from 75 to 79. They sold the team to John McMullen, who owned the team for a little over a decade, from 79 to 92. And Drayton McLean Jr. owned the team from 92 to 2011. So he was there for the success there in the 90s and early 2000s. And then Jim Crane bought the team in 2011. And I think part of his buying the team, they had to move it over to the American League.
Right.
So Jim Crane has owned it since 2011. A lot of owners are kind of, laying back in the shadows. I don't know how many owners of MLB teams the average fan can name, but I think Jim Crane is one of them due to his appearance in the public eye for so often in the past couple of years. Thoughts on any of these owners who's done a good job in anything?
Well, obviously Roy Hoffines is a Houston legend, and just his vision of the whole Astrodome and the whole complex, and bringing the Astros here, it's mythical at this point. Particularly the old Astrodome. He had his own apartment there, and bowling alleys in the back. With just crazy stuff, and so it was he like I said, he's just a huge Houston legend. John McMullen was really kind of known as, he was a New Yorker, and he just wasn't really seen as a Houston guy, and was thought more of as an investor. And Drayton McLean, he's a relatively local guy, and he's just a good old country boy, and then he really tried to make things more personable, and brought us into Minute Maid Park, and got that built, and had some really good success. At the end, he did start the tanking years, so a lot of people have bad memories of that, but he was basically trying to reduce the payroll so that he could sell the team. And obviously Jim Crane, he's has a bad reputation now, but he's actually been a very progressive owner, and really has, I think, changed the game as far as bringing in Lunau, and with the analytics aspects of how they run the team. Some people may not like the changes that have happened, where analytics rule the day. But it really is the way things are done these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So, talking about Lunau, we'll kind of segue into the GMs here. In the past quarter century, going back to 95, Jerry Hunsaker was their GM from 95 to 04. So about a decade run there for him. And again, that was their stretch with the Killer Bees there in the mid 90s, early 2000s. Tim Purpura was the GM from 04 to 07. And then another stretch with a few years, Ed Wade at the end of that Drayton McLean Jr. era. So Ed Wade was there from 07 to 2011. And then Jeff Lunau, as you mentioned there with Jim Crane, he came in 2011. He was the GM until he was unceremoniously relieved of his duties in 2019. And then James Click is their current GM, who I believe came over from Tampa Bay. So, yeah, you mentioned the analytics, and Jeff Lunau was kind of ahead of the game regarding a lot of that stuff. So, any more comments on Lunau or any of these other GMs?
Lunau, obviously, it's hard to look at him now without bringing up the scandal. But and a lot of people in baseball particularly didn't like Jeff Lunau because of his analytical mind and his kind of it's very clinical in a way. The numbers basically rule the day, so there's not the touchy feely stuff that that a lot of baseball teams go with, and then so I think he really rubbed people the wrong way. But in the end, I think that his methods have shown to be very valuable, and like I said, a lot of teams are basically doing the same thing that the Astros have been doing for years.
Yeah.
And Click is kind of, I think, coming from the Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay being a small market, they have to use analytics to try to get the value, in players. Obviously, they are very well known for developing players, and then once they get to the point where they're going to be making some money, dropping them off and trying to develop some more players to replace them. So, that type of looking at the numbers instead of the actual, human beings or the people involved is something that is necessary, I think, for some teams. But like I said, a lot of people, it rubs them the wrong way.
Yeah. We saw the kind of beginning of the analytics with the Moneyball A's. Then this is kind of like a different take on it, because so many teams were kind of figuring that out. Then this is kind of like that second wave of it. Yeah, and Lunau and the Astros were ahead of the curve on that one with so much stuff. And
the data available now is so much more, and they can do so much more with it, with the pitch tracking and the spin rates that they can measure. It's really remarkable what they can do.
Yeah, and it has, you have to, as an organization, you have to be on that if you want to compete. But I think as a fan, I don't know what your feelings are. As a fan, it's not as entertaining of a product. But if you don't try to do that, you will fall behind as a team, and you're not going to compete.
Well, fans, we have emotional attachments to players and the team and certain, things, and analytics take the emotion out of it. And like I said, it's very clinical. It's very, this is the numbers and this is what we're going to do. And sometimes that doesn't work, like we saw in the World Series, where they decided that they wouldn't keep the starting pitcher in for the third rotation, and it may have cost them. But in general, with analytics, you have to go with them because they have shown to be accurate over time.
Yeah, and if we look at the teams that have been in the World Series in the past, 5 years, they're all heavily invested in that kind of stuff. So, it might not. You mentioned, it didn't work out for, the Rays taking Snell out, and I think the Astros, they took Greinke out of that game early, right? Greinke, and it's it kind of came back to cost both of them. But on the flip side, the teams that they were playing against were also heavily invested in analytics. So it's not like analytics lost either of those World Series, because the other teams used them to win.
But the analytics, it's all, it's like anything else. It's a bell curve, and it's going to work most of the times. It's not going to work all the times. And you can't, stop and stop using analytics because the outlier events that happen, you have to stick with it. Otherwise, basically you're not using analytics at all.
Exactly. And so now to kind of get back into the emotional part of the game, some of the managers can be pretty fiery and emotional. So now we'll touch on the managers, and we'll see how many of them you can remember from the past quarter century. I've got a little tidbit on each manager, and see if you can identify him from the tidbit. So we're going again in this past quarter century. The first manager that I'm touching on, he was actually blamed by Joe Morgan. And Joe Morgan, the Hall of Famer, most associated with the Reds, but he did play for the Astros for a while. And Joe Morgan blamed this manager for the lack of postseason appearances. And so this manager was at the helm for 3 years, and they had 3 winning seasons. But Joe Morgan said that he was too uptight, and, the players kind of fed off that, and they were not able to play that loosely. So despite 3 winning seasons, no postseason appearances, and Joe Morgan blamed it on this manager. Do you remember who that was?
Honestly, I don't recall that one.
That was Terry Collins.
Terry Collins, yeah.
94 to 96. He later went on to have some success with the Mets. Terry Collins there. And then they hired a manager who made his major league debut as a pitcher at age 18. Tough to fathom that right now in these days. Especially for a domestic player, made his major league debut at age 18, and he struck out Willie Mays in the first inning. Any idea on who that is?
That's Larry Dierker.
Yeah, Larry Dierker. So he managed the team from 97 to 01.
He was actually the broadcaster the year before. They brought him from the broadcast booth to manage the team.
I think he's a lifelong Astro, if I remember correctly, right?
That's right. He started at 18.
It's the only organization he's been a part of. You mentioned a broadcaster. So he played with the Astros, obviously managed with the Astros. He was one of the ones who had his number retired, as number 49 retired by the Astros. So and he did take him to the playoffs a few times there at the end of the 90s there.
He's the opposite of uptight.
I think Joe Morgan's comment was after they went to the playoffs with Larry Dierker, and I think he may have pointed out the differences there.
Yeah, Larry Dierker's famous for his Hawaiian shirts and just his laid back attitude. He's just it's. I think they may have gone that direction because of Terry Collins.
And then another kind of, we'll touch on this, another manager's debut as a player. As a batter, the first pitcher he faced was Sandy Koufax. So, welcome to the bigs, kid. Here you go.
That's right.
And unsurprisingly, he struck out. And the first hit that he got, and that game actually, where he struck out against Koufax, it was Dodgers against Cardinals. Koufax versus Gibson, so quite a first game to be involved in there. And then his first hit was recorded off of Juan Marichal, so another Hall of Famer. Any idea on who that manager could be?
It's not coming to my mind right now.
Jimmy Williams.
Oh, yeah.
So he was manager there for a few years from 02 to 04. These are, I think it's tough to pull some of these managers from these facts. Some of them, I know Terry Collins I talked about previously on the Mets. And there's another one of these managers, at least one more, who I've mentioned on prior podcasts, and I don't want to pull the same fact. So some of these guys, I'm digging a little deeper. It's tough to identify some of them. And this one is one of those. This manager, as a player, again, we're going back to some kind of first or last or something that this guy did as a player. He recorded the 10,000th hit in A's history. So, it's pretty impressive that they can even track that. But this guy recorded the 10,000th hit in A's history. He was the manager after Jimmy Williams. Any remembrance on who that would be?
Oh, I'm sorry. My mind is drawn a blank.
Phil Garner.
Oh my gosh.
So he was there for a few years from 04 to 07.
And he played with the Astros for a stretch too, and in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Then after Garner, they had a manager who, as a player, he's the single season hits leader for the Brewers. He had 219 hits in 1980. He's also a 3-time Silver Slugger, a 2-time Gold Glover, and a 5-time All-Star as a player. Any idea on who that is?
I think I need to get another cup of coffee because my mind is not working right now.
Cecil Cooper.
Cecil Cooper.
Yeah, so he was there 07 to 09. Pretty impressive there. The single season hit leader for the Brewers, I probably would have guessed like Yount or something, but 219 hits in 1980, that's a lot of hits.
Yeah.
And the Brewers. So they're the other team that over the years switched leagues. I think prior to the Astros switching, the Brewers moved from the AL to the NL. Then they had a manager who in 1983, he was Nolan Ryan's 3,509th strikeout victim, which moved Nolan Ryan past Walter Johnson for first all time. And then Nolan Ryan would go on to strike out, over 1,500 more to get over 5,000 strikeouts. Wow. No wonder why he had his number retired by the Astros and I think some other teams as well. This player, again, these are tough ones, but any idea on who that would be?
I'm gonna have to tap out on this one too. My recall of managers isn't what I thought it was.
Brad Mills. So he was there for a few years. Then this manager was a multi-sport guy, and in college he went to Iowa. He was all Big Ten in both football and baseball for Iowa. So an impressive athlete. Any guesses on who this is?
Sorry.
Bo Porter.
Oh, Porter. Okay.
Yeah. So he was there kind of, during those lean tanking years. I think Brad Mills and Bo Porter, that stretch there.
There's a weird thing that with Astros, that's kind of a dark period because they literally were not on television for most of the town. They had a contract dispute and they were only on like 20% of the cables.
Yeah, so, we know about that in LA.
Yeah. And so it's difficult to keep up with some of the team, if you can't watch them.
Yeah, and that was, also it was not the most entertaining product on the field, as you mentioned, that tanking process. And, going back to that trivia question, they had 3 number 1 picks in a row. So, yeah, a lot of losing lean years there. But then things took an uptick when this manager was around. He was a bronze medalist for Team USA baseball in the 96 Olympics. And you may not remember him from that. I don't know if you would know those, but he was the manager from 2015 to 2019.
Yeah, AJ Hinch.
There you go. And then he was obviously let go after receiving that 1-year suspension. He's since been hired in Detroit. And then we come to the current manager, who is the first manager. And here's an easier trivia question regarding the managers. The first manager to lead 5 different teams to the postseason.
Yeah, Dusty Baker.
Yeah. He's, I think, right now in mid to late January, a lot of people are talking about the Hall of Fame. I think the Hall of Fame voting will be announced shortly. I forget the exact date. So Hall of Fame is a kind of topic of discussion among baseball people right now. Dusty Baker, not in the Hall of Fame. He had a great playing career, but not quite Hall of Fame level.
Right.
And he's also had a great managerial career. As we see, he's led 5 different teams to the postseason. Has come up short each time. He's been to the World Series, I want to say once with the 0-2 Giants. I forget, he's had some other great teams. No World Series wins. So his managerial career probably short when you look at the Hall of Fame credentials. But, when you add them together, you got a Hall of Fame player. And I've seen the argument made that, when discussing Hall of Fame, you should kind of, maybe there should be a category for like baseball life. Yeah. And if you include both of those, because right now they have to look at either the player or the manager, but if you include both, Dusty Baker, that's a great example of that.
Oh yeah. And he's so well liked, with just about everybody. He's such a good guy, and just, and he had, like you said, he had a very, very good career, a lot of good years with the Dodgers and very successful. But like you said, if they were to take a look at both of his careers, I think that he's for sure in. And it would be nice for him to actually get in, because like I said, he's such a cool guy. He's Dusty.
He created
the high five. He should get in for that.
Exactly. So you kind of touched on Larry Dierker, his laid back style, Dusty Baker. Any other thoughts on any of these other managers here?
Um, AJ Hinch was just he was a great manager. It's unfortunate what happened, and he bears a lot of the responsibility. I mean, the fact that it happened and he knew it was happening, he didn't want it to happen, but he couldn't stop it or didn't stop it. It's really inexcusable for a manager to allow that to go on if you didn't want it to happen. The report was that with the sign stealing, that the monitor that they were using, that he busted it twice to show his displeasure, when he should have just said stop. It stops now. So it's unfortunate that has tainted his career, because I thought we had a manager for life with AJ Hinch. He's just that type of guy, though. He communicates well. He's smart. He's both a player's coach and analytical smart coach. He handles both of those very well. But it's unfortunate how it all ended with him.
Yeah. So those are the managers, and then in just a moment, we'll look at the players of the past 25 years. Tony, now let's talk about the players from the Astros from the past quarter century and this roster I've assembled. And just a quick reminder to all the listeners out there, when you're assembling this roster, the rules are you go back 25 years. I did this prior to the 2020 season. So this was from 1995 to 2019. You pick one player per year. You cannot repeat players, and you must form a coherent roster. So we'll start here at the catcher position. I've got Jason Castro, a lefty from 2013. He was worth 4.2 wins. Decent on base percentage, 350, a triple slash of 276, 350, 485. Above average with a stick there, 18 home runs. Then at first base, Jeff Bagwell from 1996, he was worth 7.5 wins, led the league with 48 doubles, hit 31 bombs, drove in 120, triple slash of 315, 451, 570, OPS of over 1,000, OPS plus of 178. Wow, there's a reason why he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And then his neighbor there on the infield at second base, Craig Biggio in 97, worth 9.4 wins, led the league in runs, 146 runs.
Wow.
Ton of runs. I mean, he great on base skills, got on base at over a 400 clip. And when you do that and you're hitting in front of Jeff Bagwell, who's driving in a ton, it makes sense that he's scoring 146. 37 doubles, 22 home runs, and 34 hit by pitches. He was an all-star, Gold Glove, and Silver Slugger. Bregman is at the hot corner from 2018. He was worth 7.3 wins. He led the league in doubles with 51, drove in over 100, hit over 30 bombs. Triple slash, 286, 394, 532. Then rounding out the infield, Carlos Correa, 2017, he was worth 6.6 wins, 24 bombs, 25 doubles. I want to kind of go back that I failed to mention. Bagwell stole 21 bags. Biggio swiped 47. So a lot of speed on that right side of the infield as well. So back to Correa, 24 bombs, 25 doubles, 315, 391, 550, triple slash, good for a 155 OPS plus, also an all-star. A lot of firepower from this infield. What do you think, Tony? How do these guys, what are your thoughts on these guys?
Oh, that's the classic infield. Obviously, second base, you have Craig Biggio, and we now have Altuve, so that's obviously a debate at long term if who will be the best at that particular position. But at this particular point in Altuve's career, you got to go with Biggio, and Bregman at third. He's just a great player and great defense. So yeah, I would like to go into the field with that starting infield. Jason Castro is the outlier there, I think. I think that was probably a unique year for him. Although we just signed him again, he left and we just re-signed him. So he's coming back, and there's been some debate among fans, if we want him back, because he had a great year this year, but he I think after this year started to strike out quite a bit more, and his bat skills declined. But that's happens with catchers. If he can catch and give you good quality production, then he's very valuable. So and obviously Bagwell at first, he's Biggio and Bagwell are the all-time Astros, and I can just see Bagwell's stance and that crazy stance he had. And a thing to remember about Bagwell too, particularly with his career numbers, is that he was hitting at the beginning of his career in the Astrodome, and it was not easy to hit home runs. So,
right.
It's if he were playing in some other stadium where it was a little easier to get the ball out, his numbers would be a lot better. But like I said, and Correa at short, he's an amazing shortstop, and he's obviously he's kind of with other fans, he's
right,
kind of taking on the WWE of evil bad guy image, but he's embraced it to a certain degree, and particularly in this offseason he backed it up, and so he's really become kind of the team spokesman, and a lot of fans are really just really have taken him even more than they had previously because of the way he's kind of defended the team, and like I said, he talked the talk, but he walked the walk. He backed it up. If you're going to talk crap, you better be able to back it up.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as this roster goes, Bregman fits in well with Bagwell and Biggio as a member of the Killer Bees.
The Killer Bees.
And yes, Bagwell, that's got to be one of the all-time trade heists. I think they got him from Boston, right?
I forget the pitcher's name, but
it was like a reliever or something.
Larry Anderson.
Yeah,
and I think he was with Boston for a year, maybe, and I think they were trying to, rent him for a year to get into the playoffs, and that was a big time heist from Boston.
Yeah. So now, as we get into the outfield here, another Killer Bee, Lance Berkman, the switch hitter. I've got him in left field in 01. Led the league in 55 doubles, hit 34 bombs, drove in 126, triple slash 331, 430, 620, 161 OPS plus. Huge number there from Berkman.
Yeah.
Richard Hidalgo in center field in 2000. He was worth 6.3 wins. 44 home runs from Hidalgo, 42 doubles. Slugged over 600 that year. Impressive power numbers from Hidalgo. Then in right field, Hunter Pence in 2011, worth 3.5 wins. Kind of before Hunter Pence really started to take off, but productive years there for the Astros. Then at DH, I've got Chris Carter in 2014. He hit 37 bombs that year for the Astros. So any thoughts on the rest of this starting lineup here that I've got for the Astros?
Yeah, Lance Berkman is he's just a great guy, and he luckily went to St. Louis and was able to win a championship there. But he was a big fan favorite. And Hunter Pence, anybody that knows Hunter Pence, he's a crazy guy and kooky. When he came up, it was that run he has and his the way he wears his pants and just his whole attitude. He immediately became a fan favorite before he even really took the field, just running out to the outfield. He just you just knew something was different about him when you first saw him. And he obviously retired after this season, and I wish him well in his retirement. But he was a big fan favorite and just a great guy. And Hidalgo, particularly that year, was just a big stick. He just could smash. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty good outfield.
Yeah, and as we get to the bench here, you mentioned when we talked about Biggio at second base, Jose Altuve, got him as the backup second baseman in 2016. He was worth 7.9 wins, 216 hits, led the league. Swiped 30 bags. It did come as a price. He did get caught 10 times, which also led the league. He led the league in batting at 338. Also hit 24 bombs. So nice power production there from a second baseman and from a small package. If we didn't already have Jimmy Wynn as the toy cannon, I think that name would fit Jose Altuve pretty well. Ty Wigginton in 08. He was only worth 2.2 wins. He did hit 23 bombs, 22 doubles. He played some third, played a little left field as well. Then Michael Bourne as a backup outfielder in 2010, swiped 52 bags that year. So, if you need some speed, you could put him in there, put him in for defense as well, because he's a great defender. He's worth 3.5 wins with the glove. He was a Gold Glover out there. Yeah. Then the backup catcher, I forgot that this guy played for the Astros, although he didn't have his best year. Far from it, but Pudge Rodriguez in 09 at the tail end of his career. I've got him as the backup catcher. So, yeah, any thoughts on this bench before we move along to the pitchers?
Jose Altuve is a huge Astros fans' favorite, and again, we have the issue with the sign stealing kind of tainting his image from across the league. Although my logging of the banging showed that he didn't actually participate in the banging scheme, but he still has become kind of the guy that's taken the brunt of most of the hate, which is unfortunate. But it's just the repercussions of what happened. I think we get into a couple of these people too, where it's a circumstance of your requirements that they are on this list. Exactly. Ty Wigginton in 2008 is from the lean years, and when you have Biggio and Bagwell on those, you probably would go with the third option, which is probably somebody that had a okay year, but not a great year, and exactly. Somebody that you would consider a classic Astro. Michael Bourne was a great, a defender and center fielder, which is obviously a very important position for to have good defense in, and Ivan Rodriguez, Pudge. You don't really think of him as an Astro, but again, I think that you had to get somebody for 2009 on this list, and he's a pretty good one.
Yeah, and I mean, in all, if you're really rolling out with this lineup, you could put Altuve at DH and sit Chris Carter, because Altuve is probably a better hitter overall. Chris Carter will give you a lot of pop, but yeah, so that's probably what you do in an actual game.
And then Biggio actually played some center too, so
yeah, came up as a catcher too.
Came up as a catcher. That's right. They his center field. He bit the dust a few times on Tal's Hill when we've had Tal's Hill, so I think he wasn't too thrilled with that. But he gave it his best effort.
Yeah, we'll get to Tal's Hill again a little later on in the show. Now, as we move along to the pitching staff, we'll start with the rotation, and I'll start with a pitcher who was acquired in a midseason trade, Randy Johnson, in '98. Obviously, Randy Johnson had some phenomenal years there in Seattle. In '98, he was not putting up typical Randy Johnson numbers. I know he had some injuries. He was kind of unhappy there in Seattle. Then once he got traded to Houston, wow.
Yeah.
He made 11 starts. He went 10-1, ERA of 1.28. It's a small sample size in just 84 innings, but his ERA plus was 3.22. He struck out 116 in 84 and a third innings. His whip of under 1, 12.4 Ks per 9. Just, unreal numbers there down the stretch for Houston in '98. Got another lefty, Mike Hampton, in '99. He went 22-4, led the league with those 22 wins, ERA of 2.9. And, Hampton, this was back when they were in the NL still. So his value as a batter was also of use. He could swing it a little bit. Roger Clemens in 05. I know that he's probably most associated with the Red Sox and Yankees and the Blue Jays to a certain extent, but had some great final years there for the Astros. And in 05, led the league with that 187 ERA in over 200 innings there. ERA plus of 226 and a FIP of 287, 6.4 hits per nine. Those all led the league as well. Didn't get much run support there as he only went 13-8, but they were the pennant winner that year in 05. In 06, Roy Oswalt, he was worth 6 wins, led the league with a 298 ERA. He went 15-8. Then rounding out the rotation, I've got Garrett Cole from 2019. He went 20-5, led the league with an ERA at 2.5. Also led the league with 326 strikeouts. Wow. ERA plus of 185, FIP of 264, 13.8 Ks per nine. Those all led the league as well. What do you think on this rotation? I mean, it's pretty impressive.
That's pretty stout. I think that you would do pretty well. Obviously, Randy Johnson was a half-year rental, but when he came in, he was just amazing. It was just watching him was crazy. He just blew everybody away. That was the one of those rentals that actually worked out great. Obviously we didn't finish it off that year, but it wasn't his fault. Mike Hampton is a fan favorite. Just his attitude. He would just have bulldog attitude. Great pitcher, really, really good hitter, maybe a better hitter. So, being in the National League, that actually is a huge advantage to have a pitcher that can hit. You don't have that dead spot in the lineup. And Clemens, obviously, he's a hometown guy, and
right.
So coming back home to try to get us over the hump with Biggio and Bagwell, and in 2005 coming back with Andy Pettit, that was pretty exciting times. And obviously we got to the World Series that year, but didn't quite get there. And Royo, again, he's a fan favorite too. He's just one of those great pitchers that really hits it with the fans. And Garrett Cole's Garrett Cole. Everybody knows Garrett Cole at this point. The 2 years he had with the Astros were just amazing, just incredible. The 326 strikeouts broke a Astros record that was held by J.R. Richards since 1979. So that's a long time to have. 303 was J.R. Richards' strikeout record, and to have that broken, that's pretty remarkable. So that, like I said, that's a pretty stout rotation there.
Yeah. As we get to the bullpen, we've got Dave Veras from 95. He went 5-1 out of the pen with a 2.26 ERA. He appeared in 72 games, over 100 innings, so he can give you, multiple innings out of the pen. Billy Wagner, the lefty, in 03. He's appeared on a lot of these rosters as he's played for multiple teams, and he's been great everywhere he went. He was worth 3.4 wins. Just a 1-4 record, which sometimes you'll see with a closer. Had an ERA of 178, 44 saves, struck out 105 in 86 innings there. Just a dominant reliever wherever he's been. Octavio Detel from 02. He made 83 appearances, 97 in the third innings, 185 ERA. He was worth 4.2 wins, struck out 118 in those 97 in the third innings. And then keeping the strikeouts moving along here, Brad Lidge in 04, he went 6-5. That's a lot of decisions out of the pen. He pitched about every other day, made 80 appearances, 94 2/3 innings. So he went 6-5 with a 1.9 ERA, 29 saves, 157 strikeouts in 94 2/3 innings. Chad Qualls in 07, ERA right about 3. Also a ton of decisions out of the pen, 6-5. He had 79 appearances. So again, I mean, these guys, Veras, 72 appearances, Wags, 78, Detel, 83, Lidge, 80, Qualls, 79. So these guys are pitching every other day, rubber arms. Wilton Lopez in 2012, he went 6-3, 2.17 ERA out of the pen. I mean, and just a pedestrian 64 appearances and 66 in the third innings compared to the other guys. And rounding it out, Will Harris in 2015, he went 5-5. Again, ton of decisions out of this bullpen. 1.9 ERA. He had 2 saves for them, 71 innings. He struck out just about a batter per, 68 strikeouts in 71 innings. So yeah, a lot of live arms in this bullpen. What were your thoughts, any memories of these guys?
Oh yeah, well, Billy Wagner, I mean, he just the guy could bring it. I mean, he just had an arm, and then he had a gunslinger attitude too. When he came in, you just felt like he's just going to shut him down. He was one of those relievers that if it was the ninth and you had a run lead, it was over. And obviously, he had 4 losses, but those things are going to happen to relievers, particularly if you pitched in so many games. So yeah, he's a huge fan favorite. He's trying to get into the Hall of Fame. He didn't quite play as long as some other players. I think he said he wanted to shut it down early so he could be with his family, which is admirable, but, it does affect your career numbers. But, in his peak, he was definitely Hall of Fame caliber. Octavio Woodetell was another one that could just bring the heat. He was just a big arm and lots of strikeouts, and the same with Brad Lidge, just crazy, big arms, So we've been kind of spoiled during that period with the relievers. We just always seem to have somebody that could just come in and shut people down, and a true closer. When they would close it out, they would not, it wouldn't be one of these things that like, oh my gosh, they're bringing him in, with a lot of these teams where you're like, oh great, so yeah, that's pretty good bullpen. Then Chad Qualls was a very good quality reliever. Wilson Lopez, I think, is one of those guys that's in the dark area, and you had to pick somebody for 2012. And then, but Will Harris too is a very good reliever, relatively recently, and is really quality relief pitcher.
Yeah, so that's the pitching staff, and we discussed the whole team. And listeners, if you are so inclined, if you're motivated to make a roster, whether it's for the Astros or any other team, you can go ahead and visit the website boxseatbanter.com. There's a link to download a spreadsheet off of Google Spreadsheets. You can go ahead and download that and make your own roster. And if you do, we would love to see it. Go ahead, submit those. But yeah, it was a fun experiment putting this Astros roster together.
It's really a great project you have here. The whole concept is really intriguing, and it really is like a puzzle trying to figure out, well, who can I get from this year, versus that year and position. And you can't just kind of go down the list and say, pick this person, that person. Yeah. Really, you do have to look at the whole span of the 25 years.
Yeah. And, it is a puzzle. That's the best way to put it. And yeah, there are players that we cannot get, and we'll discuss those guys coming up right here. Tony, anytime we put these together, and as you mentioned, it is a puzzle. There's going to be pieces that fit into the puzzle and pieces that do not fit. And I'm sure, listeners are chiming in, like, how could you have this guy and not this guy, or what are you thinking on this guy? And this is a section we go over that. So I know you kind of you put together a puzzle yourself a little bit. I know off air you said that it was pretty similar to mine, but are there any differences? You mentioned one difference. You've mentioned one name who's not on mine, at least off air. So now right. you can mention those guys. Who did I miss out on, and who are you kind of surprised are not on this roster?
Well, I switched out Bregman's 2018 for the 2019. Obviously, he had a higher WAR, but he's still on the team. But that allowed me to pick up Justin Verlander. Well, he would have been on the 2019 too, but I replaced Garrett Cole with Justin Verlander, mainly because in 2018 he had such a it wasn't that much higher. They were pretty neck and neck, and both 2018 and 2019. But I think the Justin probably outpitched Cole in those 2 years. Obviously, if you were to pick a team that you wanted to take the field right now, particularly with Verlander being injured. But even then, if he weren't injured, his age, he would probably want to go with Cole. But for this particular exercise, I switched those out. I also Dallas Keuchel, would be.
Yeah, I think he won the Cy Young there with Houston, right?
Right. But again, this is a puzzle, and he's 2015, and so who do you take off? I think that would be which of the starting pitchers would you take off? So if you take somebody out of the starting lineup, you have to,
right.
One of those other years, you'd have to find somebody else to take this place. So yeah, it's unfortunate with this exercise that people like that don't quite have a spot, but that's part of the fun of it is how do you mix and match?
Yeah. Verlander was definitely one of the big names. Yeah, Keuchel is tough, win a Cy Young and not crack the rotation.
It's that, but that's look at that rotation. I mean, you got some guys that are just.
Yeah. And then in there, you've kind of mentioned their dark years before, and you got to take somebody off from those years. But recently they've had such a great team. They've had so many great players that we haven't been able to include everyone. No Verlander,
and they're young too, so you can't pick an earlier year.
Right?
You have
no,
a 5-year span.
No Springer. So Springer was he's had some huge years. It's tough to not have him on there. If you're going strictly with a DH, Yordan Alvarez.
Yeah,
he was rookie of the year, had a great year.
But it's only 1 year, so you just don't have a chance to put him anywhere else.
Exactly. You mentioned Keuchel. Carlos Lee was another guy, I think, longtime Astro. But
Jose Lima also, he won 22 games 1 year.
Yeah, and, Lima time
and Darryl Kyle. We've had a pretty stout history, a long history, some really great, pitchers. So it's really difficult to pick them.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of competition there for that rotation. A lot of worthy candidates.
Absolutely. It's tough. So I couldn't really improve very much on your rotation, maybe switch out a few years to get some better WAR, but just personally, I think JV over Cole for those particular 2 years.
Yeah. The other names I wanted to mention. So you mentioned Keuchel, Carlos Lee, Morgan Ensberg had a couple good years at third base. And Moises Alou had a huge year in '98.
Oh yeah. Oh, he was just incredible that year. He just was amazing.
And guys like Bagwell and Biggio, you could take pretty much any year out of those guys. And, if you take a different year, the dominoes are going to fall differently, and Absolutely. You may be able to get some different guys on there. And, if, as an Astros fan doing this, you may have certain sentimental connections to certain players that you just want to include on your roster, whereas I don't have any of those connections. I just kind of do it strictly. So, an Astros fan doing this, you might, it's fun to do it for that as, a walk down memory lane as you kind of remember these guys. And
particularly like somebody like Jose Lima, he's such a personal guy, and, he's passed away. And so he was definitely a fan favorite. And with the 22 wins, he had just a huge year for us that 1 year. And somebody like him, I think, is somebody a lot of people might try to find a spot for.
Yeah, that's a great point. So again, if you want to make a roster on your own, go ahead, visit the website, download that spreadsheet, make it. It is a fun little experiment, a fun project. And it's, if you're yelling at me for omitting these guys, well, now here's your chance to include those guys and make a roster that's better than mine.
Right. If you like Jose Lima, you're going to take Randy Johnson off. I mean, come on. I mean, that's the problem with this, or the interesting part of this exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's fun. Go ahead and make one. And again, submit it if you do. It is time to get to our listener questions. Every week we open it up for the listeners to submit questions. When we do so on Twitter and Instagram. So again, make sure to follow on both those platforms and get those questions in. Our first question comes from Matt Hutchison, who is he's been a guest on the show a couple times, discussing the Giants and the A's. So discussing, as an A's fan, he is heavily invested in, the Astros playing in the same division and finishing behind them in recent years. He asks, should the title be stripped? We can both answer that one. So Tony, first, I'll let you answer that one. Should it be stripped? And, we've never before I let you answer, we've never really seen a cheating scandal like this for a winner. You got to go back to 1951 where the Giants had a, similar sign stealing scandal where, they had somebody out in the scoreboard with a telescope and he was flashing the signs. And they came back, they beat the Dodgers to win the pennant. They ultimately lost to the Yankees in the World Series. So the prior cheating scandal did not result in a World Series champion, whereas this one did. So we've never seen anything like it before. There's no prior example to go on. So what do you think? Should the title be stripped?
Honestly, I understand people not thinking that it was won, but I think that that's a slippery slope because we could start going back and looking at lots of different events and lots of different teams. PEDs, even pine tar can affect the outcome of a series, which is accepted, but it's still cheating. So I think that is kind of a dangerous road to take, and where I understand people wanting to put an asterisk on it, and I think that officially removing or stripping the Astros from the championship, I think is probably not the right thing to do. And what would you do with it? Would you give it to the Dodgers? I mean, it's just a difficult thing to do, and so, for my opinion, I would say no. But I understand how some people feel that it should be.
Yeah, I think if it were to be stripped, you can't give it to anybody else because. You don't know if the Yankees would have won in the, so you can't give it to the Dodgers. Because they could have been playing the Yankees and the Dodgers could have lost to the Yankees. So,
and I will say too, I've looked at, I logged all the bangs that I could from the home games that year, and I have listened to the playoffs and have not found any evidence of them using the banging scheme in the playoffs. Now, the audio quality of the recordings of the video progressively gets worse every series. So in the LA series, it was really, really bad because of the crowd noise. But if you think about it, if you have a system that is based on audible signals,
right,
it breaks down if the crowd gets too loud. So it could have been that they tried and it didn't work, or that I just can't hear because of the way that the audio was recorded. I can't say that they did or didn't.
Right.
But I haven't been able to detect anything where I was able to very clearly over 1,100 bangs I was able to hear in the regular season. So, Correa said that they that the trash can was there, but they didn't use it as much because it didn't work as well. The commissioner said they used it through the playoffs, but he didn't give very good details.
Yeah,
the report was pretty bad as far as details go.
Right.
I mean, how can you say they used it during the playoffs that they won the World Series and not give any more details? I mean, you really need to get a little bit more detailed, I think, with a situation like that.
I think the report, they didn't want to, kind of like, the steroid scandal, in the 90s, it was kind of like sweeping it under the rug because it's a black eye to baseball, and baseball doesn't want to, admit that there was such, cheating to, this, we don't know to what degree it was. I think they do, and they might not want to admit that all this was going on under their watch. So they released this report that is pretty vague and doesn't really say much.
But the problem is if you create that vacuum of information, people will fill that vacuum. And so then you have people saying that,
Exactly.
they did this, they whistled, they have, all this other stuff that there's no evidence for. And so it doesn't stop people from speculating or from believing something happened. And so it's better, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do the site that I did. I wanted to find the truth, and I wanted to publish the truth, the whole truth, whatever it was, so that people could look at it and make their own judgment. And unfortunately, like I said, the audio quality of the playoffs, I can't say one way or the other that it did or didn't happen. But that's, I understand people's not giving them benefit of the doubt because, they don't necessarily deserve it, but I don't have any firm evidence that they cheated in the playoffs.
Right. And you mentioned, it would be a slippery slope if we do strip them. I thought, before the report came out, I didn't, this was just when it was revealed that they were cheating. But before, and then that the investigation was starting, I didn't feel like there could be any, that they could strip them. And then when they announced the penalty, as a non-Astros fan, it felt light. But, whatever. But then I think the thing that a lot of fans are having trouble with is like how Jim Crane and how some of the members of the organization have handled it. And I think that's created a lot of animosity and, wanted more reason to kind of strip the title. Regardless of all of that, though, in the court of public opinion, people, they know what happened, and whether it's stripped or not, it's there. If there's an asterisk or not, people are going to remember it how they want to remember it. Some Astros fans may remember it fondly. They may think that the title was earned. Some may question it.
If you took it away, they would still feel, the Astros fans would feel the same way. If you keep it, the people, the fans of other teams will feel the same way. It's not going to change really how anybody feels about that, particular World Series. So I like I said, if you start doing that, we could look at a lot of different things. And,
So
I feel like some of the Yankees late, 90s World Championships are tainted because of, they were bigger PED users than a lot of other teams, but that's my opinion. And, how can we prove that it made that much of a difference?
Right. So I think, the court of public opinion will put that title wherever, each person thinks that it should be. And Matt wanted to chime in. For the millions of listeners around the world, he says to strip them.
I would also like to say, when you talked about Jim Crane and his handling of the situation, it really was a mishandling of the situation. The PR, the crisis management from the Astros and Jim Crane was abysmal. It was horrible, and it was a total disaster. So I get people being frustrated and upset at them, because I am, and I think a lot of Astros fans just want him to shut up. They just mishandled it from the very beginning. And so it's very understandable how people feel about the Astros.
Yeah, Jim Crane kind of ahead of the game with the analytics, with Lou now there, but probably behind the game quite a bit with his PR.
Definitely.
And again, this is not kind of a bit of a question from Billy Petru. And this is more kind of showing the displeasure from other fan bases. How can we get the Astros out of MLB? So we don't need to answer that, but I just wanted, that's some of the feelings from fans across the league. Is it tough to be a fan of a team right now that is kind of public enemy number one with the other 29 teams?
It's been a rough year, to be honest with you. The way I dealt with it was to look at it analytically and do this project so that I could try to understand the scope of it, who was involved, and to try to, fill in some of the gaps with real information that was missing from the Astros and from MLB on this subject. But it's still very difficult to be on any sort of social media bringing up the Astros. The thing that I think frustrates a lot of people is that, we're not the ones that cheated. The fans didn't cheat,
Right.
We were kind of victims in a way too of this. So, if you're on social media and I'm saying I'm an Astros fan and you say cheaters, you're not telling the people that actually cheated anything. They're never going to see that. You're really just kind of dumping on a fan who was had nothing to do with it except just happened to be, a fan of the team. And, I've told other people, but, it's my team. I didn't, pick them out of a hat. It's just, it's kind of like family. You don't get to pick your team. And,
right.
And it is my team more than any other person. It's the fans' team, really. Mm-hmm. So this will pass, but, I just hope that people will eventually kind of forgive the Astros as a entity, this fictional entity of a team. And, if you want to hold it against certain players, and then okay, but
right.
Eventually, hopefully this will all kind of die down, and then not people won't forget, but they will forgive or just move on, I guess.
Right. And I forgot the second half of Matt's question was, kind of more towards me. Would my answer be different if the roles were reversed? And I, like you said, as a fan, it's tough because you were not a part of it. You want to look at it, you're rooting for these guys. You have certain feelings towards them, but then it's kind of tainted now. And I would be, if the shoe were on the other foot, if the Dodgers had won the 2017 World Series, but it came out that they were cheating, I would be heartbroken. And I probably would not think, hold that title as in high regard. You look back at some of the that 88 World Series. I was too young to remember it, but I've certainly seen everything, and I have fond feelings towards that title. And then of course this 2020 year, it was an odd year, but definitely have very good feelings towards that. I don't think would not have good feelings towards the 2017 title had it come about that the Dodgers were cheating or, doing something like that.
If you look at the definition of the word, the 2017 title is tainted. There's no way around it. It's just, it doesn't have, there's question about it. So it is definitely tainted. Some Astros fans won't admit that, but that's just the reality of what happened. But like I said, in some ways the fans are victims here too. And right. Frankly, the way it's been we've taken so much crap that a lot of fans have basically gotten kind of an F you attitude at this point. It's like, well, if you're just going to keep dumping on me, then screw you. We're champs and deal with it, Mm-hmm. So it's become it's gotten better over the last few months, but it's particularly as Astros players that were involved start going to other teams, like Springer just signed with the Blue Jays, mm-hmm. But it was particularly weird, like in spring training when we did have fans, how they were booing the Astros, right. But they had people involved on their team and they were cheering them, so it's been a tough year for Astros fans, but it's getting better, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. And then our final questions come from Joey Harmon, who again, he's been a guest a couple times. And before I get to this question, he just wanted to point out that he's got a lot of respect for you, what you did in terms of your website and really looking at that and addressing it, and trying to just find out more information. Because, you mentioned that the commissioner's report, it was not full of information. So Joey, he's got a lot of respect for you. And he kind of felt bad asking, but he wanted to hear your opinion on Houston and the pitchers, and we see a huge uptick in spin rates and overall performance. Do people think that's player development or analytics, or is this like another kind of cheating scandal? I know that we already heard a bit about it with Brian Harkins, the former Angels visiting clubhouse manager who got fired for selling some of that stuff to players. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I'll let you go before I chime in.
Yeah, I think that foreign substance pine tar is the next scandal to happen in MLB. As far as the Astros go, though, I think one of the things that's happened, one of the reasons it's becoming a scandal is because the analytics, the high-speed cameras allow you to use the foreign substances better.
Mm-hmm.
You can do more analytics on how to throw a pitch to get better spin rates, and basically make it more effective. There's also, different substances that they're using. I think Trevor Bauer said he consulted a chemical engineer to come up with another substance, and obviously he, has been a opponent of it, but it appears that this last year he actually started using foreign substances and won the Cy Young, and nobody seems to take too much umbrage to that. But I think one of the things you have to think about is you have to question, how many pitchers do you think are using pine tar? Some estimates are 70%, some say it's 90, 95%. And if that's true, then pitchers coming to the Astros, it's not the first time they've ever heard of pine tar. You know, it's not like they take them to the back room and say, oh, here's our secret. It's pine tar. It's been going on for decades in MLB. So it's probably more related to their pitcher development, their use of high-speed cameras before anybody else, and their analytics.
Yeah. You mentioned Trevor Bauer, his fastball spin, he's always been pretty good. If you go back, look at like in 2017, he was in the 72nd percentile. Then 2018, that jumped up to the 82nd. Then 2019, he was in the 89th. And then this year, he was in the 100th. He's like had the best fastball spin.
If you look at it per game, there's actually the last month of 2019. There's a 400 RPM jump in his four-seamer, and it continues. And he even said after that the only way to get 400 RPM spin rate increase is to use foreign substances. So,
yeah. Although then go on.
No, I'm just saying that and it's not a Trevor Bauer issue, I think, and I don't think it's an Astros issue. I think it's a league issue because it is pretty much league wide at this point.
Yeah, I agree. But now going back to the Astros real quick, I mean, we look at Garrett Cole, Trevor Bauer's former UCLA teammate. Cole came up with the Pirates, and he had with the Pirates, his fastball spin velocity was, far from elite. He was in like the 30s when you talk about his percentile across the league.
I think he actually started throwing it faster though.
He did, yeah. I mean, and the Pirates are also notorious for not utilizing their pitchers the best. We've seen it not just in Garrett Cole, but in some other pitchers as well who've gone on to other teams.
Which is one of the reasons the Astros targeted him. They looked at the analytics and they saw that they could improve his outcomes by adjusting how he pitched and what pitches he threw and how often. A lot of what the Astros do is say, this pitch gives you better outcomes, throw it more.
Yeah, exactly. And this pitch is dump this pitch, throw this one. Although his fastball spin jumped from the 32nd percentile to the 81st percentile when he went over to Houston. And in 2019, it was in the 95th percentile.
So the question is, did he not know about pine tar? Or did he just not use it? Or
did they have different, do they have a better
that's an issue that's coming up that a lot of teams, if you look at some of the latest reports, teams are developing their own substances and advertising that to free agents, saying if you come here, you can use that. And I think that's something, and it's not just the Astros. I don't even know if the Astros are one of the teams that are doing that, but I think that league wide, I think we need to be concerned about that because we really don't want this off the field chemistry, engineer aspect of that becoming how affecting the performance on the field.
Yeah, and I mean those balls are slick. Anyone who's caught a foul ball or has got a big league ball, you feel those things are, they're like cue balls. They're slick. So
it's ridiculous.
I know that they've got that special rubbing mud from a special location, a secret location on the what river is it? Is it like the Hudson River? I want to say
some weird river somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, secret locations, mud that every ball is rubbed up with to kind of get rid of that sheen a little bit and give it some grip, but it's not enough.
Yeah, in the Korean leagues, they use a ball that's tackier, and so there are some solutions to this. And it used to be that people thought it was for grip and so that they could, not beat people or it wouldn't slip. But we now know that it really is about spin.
Yeah.
And that it really is about, just getting that extra little edge. And that certain, like we were just talking about, there are different substances that work better than others. So, do we want a pitcher to be successful because he has a better substance than, maybe we could just legalize it and say, this is the substance you're going to use.
Yeah. I think that's the best solution, is to create something league-wide, create a standard, that, because they have the rubbing mud that they put on there. There could be something else that they provide.
But I don't think it's a situation that can continue where basically most of the pitchers in the league are ignoring the rules. I think that if you have rules, they need to be enforced, or you need to get rid of the rules.
Yeah.
Because that does lead to people kind of saying, well, the rules are not necessarily rules, and that we can start to stretch that here and there. It's been kind of an issue that I've actually had a couple conversations with Trevor Bauer online about it. He's responded to me a few times.
Although if you are using something to put on the ball, so Coca-Cola, some Vaseline or something, just make sure that it's made in the USA, because it says no foreign substances.
There you go. That's right. Maybe that's how he justifies it. He seems like a made in the USA type of guy.
We'll finish up with a lighter note here on the questions. Again, one more question from Joey. He says, do you miss Towles Hill? Should we have more features within the playing field that make parks unique, or just keep that stuff outside the lines?
Towles Hill was interesting, and it was funny, but I think it actually ended up being dangerous. I think, if you're going in a full sprint on a flat surface and then you don't really know where the hill is, it could be dangerous. I think but certain aspects of the parks, I think it would be fun to have different fences and, different layouts and stuff, but I think particularly Towles Hill, while it was intriguing and it was fun to watch some of the videos, I think it was just an injury waiting to happen, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think, it is kind of a fun quirk, but I think anything that's an injury risk like that is unnecessary. Some of the old parks, now we don't really have any old parks aside from, Wrigley and Fenway. The old parks, I think it's understandable to have like some
brick fences.
Well, not brick, but maybe like some quirky corners in the outfield, but in modern parks, I don't think we should have any like real dangerous, quirky areas. It's nice to have different dimensions, different fence sizes and heights and that kind of stuff. That's all great. It gives each park their character. But, I don't feel like, again, in this modern world with all the architectural advancements we have, there's no need to have bullpens on the field, to have hills on the field. Although it is, and the flagpole was on the field too, right?
It was, and it was in fair play. So if you hit a 500-mile or 500-foot ball, it hit that flagpole and bounced back in, it was a double or whatever.
Yeah, so it is kind of quirky, and it is a fun little thing. But I think the injury risk is unnecessary in this day and age.
Particularly with the way they're paying these players, and then just it's such a big hit to a team to have a player go out.
Yeah. So those are the questions this week. Understandably, they all kind of there was a certain theme to them.
It wasn't surprising, honestly.
So those are the questions. Again, make sure to follow on Twitter and Instagram. Get those questions in. Tony, we've been, talking a lot about the team in the past 25 years. We kind of got off track there in the last segment talking about the scandal, but we'll get back to this team now. How would you grade this team that I've constructed, this Astros roster, maybe some of the strengths and weaknesses, and what letter grade would you assign it?
This is obviously a very, very strong team here. I think the infield is top notch, and an A. The starting rotation would be pretty hard to beat. There might be a few teams that could beat it, but I think that's definitely. I think that definitely an A. I think the outfield, you got Hunter Pence here, Lance Berkman, and Richard Hidalgo. I think if you look at their careers, there might be some teams that could beat that. So that's probably a B outfield. And then if you start looking at the bench, we have Ty Wingington and Michael Bourne, which had some pretty good years. They had some pretty good years with the Astros, but I think if you look at their careers, it's maybe a weak spot. So I think overall, I would probably give this a B plus, maybe an A minus, but I think a B plus is a fair grade.
Yeah, I think offensively they've got some good speed there. They got, as a group, they've got a lot of stolen bases. As a group, they also have the most hit by pitches. But overall, they're kind of average across the board in other categories. The infield, as you mentioned, is strong. The outfield leaves a little bit to be desired. Hidalgo, he had a lot of pop that year. But yeah, Hunter Pence, not his best year. Decent year from Berkman, yeah, but the outfield, I feel like, could do better. The strength of the lineup definitely comes from the infield. The catcher is a bit of a weak spot. Jason Castro had a good year that year, but yeah, Pudge, tail end of his career, not a typical Pudge year. So catcher's a bit weak. That rotation, a very strong rotation, surprisingly good bullpen. I was surprised at how good this bullpen turned out to be. A great ERA, good K numbers, and I agree with you. I'm giving them a B plus overall. So our grades are pretty much in line with each other. Listeners, if you want to chime into the conversation, give it a grade. You can hit me up on social media. Tony, we've been discussing a lot here in terms of, things that have happened in the past quarter century for the Astros. So, I'll go ahead, throw it to you first to share your final thoughts on the Astros, on the organization, anything that you want to share.
Okay. Thank you, Billy. I want to thank you for being here. This is a really interesting project and an interesting exercise. And it's been a lot of fun talking to you about the Astros. I would like to just address the asterisks in the room, like we talked about earlier, and just say that obviously, the recent history of the Astros is somewhat tainted with a lot of fans. But if you look at this team from their start, it's been a very enjoyable team and a pretty competitive team given their market size and it has a pretty rich history and a lot of great Astros fans. It's been one of the thrills of my life, just to be an Astros fan. And in the end, it is baseball, and I understand people are angry at this team right now, and I understand that it's justified. But they made some mistakes, and hopefully people will, unless you have to forgive, but I think that maybe a little bit of understanding and to realize that it's a game, and hopefully we can all just kind of at some point get back to enjoying the game and being fans, and some lighthearted ribbing every once in a while. And but for me, it's been a tough year for it as an Astros fan, but I we'll get through it, and hopefully other fans can they don't have to, like I said, they don't have to forget, they don't have to forgive, but let's just hopefully get to the point where we can just worry about playing baseball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As I close up here, I agree with you. The Astros, they're tarnished recently, rightfully so, by that recent history. But, they've had some, if we just look at this past quarter century, they've had a very exciting stretch there from the, mid 90s to the mid 2000s, that kind of decade run there. And it should not be overlooked. They kind of have been overshadowed by recent history, understandably so. But that stuff should not be forgotten. They did not handle the scandal well. We kind of touched on that. The PR was terrible. And it'll take some time for people to get over it. I think the pandemic, I don't know if that, helped or hurts the situation, because I think that the fans, they wanted to voice their displeasure, and they began doing so in spring training. I know that people were looking forward to the Astros coming to town so they could go boo them and, it is kind of cathartic to maybe just get that out, and that could maybe help the healing process. I'm not sure. The Astros, I don't think they were scheduled to come to Dodger Stadium, but, they obviously were going to come to Angel Stadium. And, I was planning on going there for, a game or two to voice my displeasure. So I think not having that, I don't know if now we got through the season. I don't know if people will forget more or if they'll come out with a vengeance again when they're able to attend. But I think if they were able to go in 2020, maybe that would have sped up this process to get over it. I don't know.
I think it's just delayed it. So I think it'll happen for sure. Like we talked about earlier, more people are leaving the team that were part of the scandal.
Right.
So
and
it's kind of harder to look at the Astros and
exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. It's going to make it harder to get on, because you're going to go to an Astros game and there's going to be people who are not involved in that. And they're just going to have to wear it from the fans, because of what the past players have done. It's unfortunate for them, but maybe they'll do, and maybe that'll help get through this. In other episodes that I've done talking about the teams, it's been kind of easier to foresee their future, whether they're a team contending right now or a team that's trying to rebuild, and you see some of the stuff. But with the Astros, they're at an odd place in their right now. They've been contending for the past several years. We now have seen a couple guys go to other teams, and with this whole scandal, it's tough to know what's in the immediate future for the Astros as we go forward from here.
And their farm system isn't what it was previously. And, people say that the punishment wasn't very strong, but the draft picks actually are hurting.
Right. So there's that. Tony, it's been fun talking about the Astros with you. I appreciate your perspective. I appreciate, what you've done as a fan to, not overlook this and actually provide something for, baseball, to an additional kind of resource there to look into this. So, I thank you for that. And again, I know Joey mentioned that he had a lot of respect for you. I also have a lot of respect for you, what you've done. I know, it's not easy as a fan to have that, to go through that. So I appreciate that. It's been fun. Thank you for joining us here on the show today.
Well, thank you, Billy. I really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed this time.
Yeah. And again, that is, so you can check out his website if you have not done so, signstealingscandal.com. And then you can, if you want to follow him on Twitter, it's at Adams_AT. Just positive vibes out there for Tony Adams. So thank you, Tony. It's been fun talking about the Astros. This is Billy Ballas of Boxy Banter signing off.